Yo, what's going on guys, it is Fox98 here, welcome back to a brand new video and another episode of the F1 debate for you guys today here on the channel. Today, we're going to be reviewing last weekend's Brazilian Grand Prix. By the time this video will be going out for you guys, it would have been pretty much exactly 1 week and we'd be halfway through yet another horrific Grand Prix. But today, we're basically going to be quickly reviewing, obviously, the Brazilian Grand Prix. There's not really much for me to review because I really didn't like it, but also I want to kind of discuss whether these new regulations have actually helped or fully just hindered Formula 1 in general. So if you end up enjoying today's video, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here as well, and let's get straight into it then. So first things first, this was the sprint weekend, and no matter what, Interlagos always produces brilliant racing. It has done for many, many generations of rules and eras within Formula 1, and for an example, like last year was no different. 2021 was an absolute classic. 2019 was again full of its thrills and spills. 18 was, you know, there's always been brilliant Brazilian Grand Prix, but unfortunately this weekend we really didn't get that. And every single video that I've done for the F1 debate series, which I'm genuinely still surprised I've actually covered every single F1 weekend in an F1 debate video, and the only time I was not able to do one was for Imola, and then it ended up getting cancelled anyway. So the fact that I've done all this is already surprising enough. But every single sprint weekend I've always come onto the F1 debate and basically slandered it, and I don't feel like I need to slander it anymore because I'm pretty sure you guys who watch this regularly know how much I hate it. But the problem that we had in this sprint weekend is that we very much saw what happened in the sprint is basically what happened, but in a much longer format, aka the full Grand Prix. That's where I got very frustrated watching the race itself. So in the sprint, we obviously saw Verstappen was extremely quick, and the quickest on the grid. We saw that McLaren in the hands of Lando Norris was rapid. We saw Aston Martin taking a step forwards compared to where they were in Mexico after they pretty much redid everything that they did upgrade-wise with their floor, with their diffuser. They basically mixed all of the old and a bit of the new, and rather than having an old and a new, they just took them together, did a little scrunch ball like this and threw it onto the car, and it worked. So we saw them doing well, and then we saw Ferrari, Mercedes were way off the pace. Mercedes more so than Ferrari, and then AlphaTauri had some great pace. That's what we saw in the sprint, and guess what? It's exactly what we saw in the main race itself, and that's where I looked at my dad, because I'm pretty sure I watched the sprint race with my dad, and then I watched the main race back at my house, you know, alone, and I just, you know, I was there with my dad, and after the sprint race finished, we were both just there like, well, we know, well, there's tomorrow sorted then. Like, Verstappen's going to win, because he's miles clear. Norris is probably going to get second, because he'll recover enough to get back up to where he was. And then the rest is, well, the rest. And yeah, guess what? It's exactly what it was. And this is what I mean about sprints. I mean, sometimes they can just throw up a curveball. I mean, even though it was a much more exciting season, back in 2021, when Lewis Hamilton got disqualified for a rear wing infringement under the technical regulations when his DRS flap was open, I mean, I was, you know, because I am a Mercedes Hamilton fan, I was a lot more passionate back then because we were in such a heated title race versus Red Bull and Verstappen. The problem was, though, is even then, is I felt like as soon as Hamilton recovered from last to finish 5th and then had to take the 5-place grid penalty for the engine change and started 10th, I don't know whether it was after qualifying or whether it was after the sprint race, but I just knew straight away, yeah, Hamilton's probably just going to win this. Like, if you can get from 20th all the way up to 5th in a sprint race, which is, what, 24 laps, I think, around Interlagos, you've then got a 71-lap Grand Prix coming up, where he's halfway further up the grid than normal. Get through the first lap, obviously. Well, yeah, he's probably going to win. And he won. So it was only then that I sort of clicked, like, well, it's after watching this sprint, well, hang on a minute. Even the sprints that started back in 2021 were really predictable. Like the sprint in Silverstone. Obviously, Verstappen was the quicker driver around Silverstone, but Hamilton had said, no, I'm not having any of that. I'm going to smash you right off the field. And then it put the race, obviously, in a main, you know, in a complete line of light of we have no idea what's going to happen. I genuinely can't even remember. Oh, Italy was the other sprint, but we saw that McLaren were really quick and difficult to pass in a straight line. Red Bull, obviously, Mercedes were quick. Didn't have as much, they had a little bit more downforce on, but they needed to be at the front and they struggled. And then I just clocked, I was like, well, actually everything's all the same. So yeah, that's my pieces on the sprint. But then the race itself, this is what I wanted to talk about. Has the new regulations of Formula One really hurt the sport? In the race, I believe there was either 23 or 24 or even 25 on-track overtakes throughout the entirety of the race, which was the fewest amount that we had seen at Interlagos since 2011. And it begged the question, these are regulations that are meant to make the cars faster, they're obviously faster, but a lot easier to follow in order to help aiding overtaking. And yet we're coming into races where we're seeing a dramatic drop-off in overtakes from last year versus this year. Now, of course, we were always going to see a small drop-off in terms of overtakes between last year and this year, specifically because the regulations, while they haven't stayed identical, in other words, they raised the floor edges by 15 millimeters and didn't really do too much with it. Obviously, the more downforce that's added onto these cars, the more turbulent air that's going to come through. And again, now in 2024, we're going to be seeing, again, no changes to the regulations at all. So even more downforce is going to be put onto these cars, and they're going to be even harder to follow. And it's not till 2025 when there is a form of regulation change. Before then, we go into the major one of 2026. But I just wanted to ask this question. This is pretty much an open one for all of you guys out there. Do you actually even like these new regulations in Formula One? Obviously, we're still in the very early eras of it. And of course, when the 26 engine comes into play and then there's, further developments, of course, we're only into our second season of it. But what we have seen is Red Bull obviously completely controlling proceedings at the moment, and nobody can really get near them. And I've always been saying the same thing, and I'll keep relaying the same thing. It's up to the other teams to make sure that they're the ones giving us the entertainment by being better, because if they don't, then Red Bull will just obviously fly off into the wind a bit. And overall, I genuinely do believe that these new regulations in Formula One have just made the sport worse for me. I really do. I think, there's too much, there's not enough for me. What makes it so sour is that we've gone from an era of Formula One where, alright, in fairness, it was genuinely hard to overtake. Like the 2021 cars, while they were rapid, they were obviously with the front wings, the barge boards in particular, they were very, very hard to overtake. I get that, okay? And there was a massive downforce loss. And even when the new generation of cars came in last year, they were saying how much easier it was to follow. The biggest issue that I've just got is I just feel like right now, Formula One's just in a place where I'm not really satisfied with it. But then, would I be satisfied if we were in a different point of Formula One? I don't know. And what I mean by this is we're in an era right now where we've got these ground effect era cars with budget caps. And I'm kind of trying to flip in my head. Do I actually like this or not? And I'm leaning more towards no. Now, obviously, we're never ever going to see Formula One coming back into play with basically no restrictions on budget at all. Because, of course, that's how we got into the situations of, teams not really making any progress up and down the order. And, of course, that's where we saw teams, liquidate and make massive losses. Of course, the budget cap not only is just restrict teams to spending and make everybody equal in terms of how much resources they can spend, but also, obviously, for actually these companies to make profit. Otherwise, Formula One would just be seeing different teams coming and going constantly. But there's also an element of me that sits there and goes, let's say McLaren, right? They started the season off really, really poorly, and then they've obviously built up and gone straight through. But say, for example, like a Mercedes or Ferrari, they're like, yeah, we can't change anything of our car till the next year because, they've made an error heading into this year. And I get that. Look, if you're not good enough, you'll be poor for the whole season. But I really just don't like that. I don't like how a team can't just go ahead and change their chassis or their monocoque structure to go ahead and reprocess and build a new construction of car throughout the course of the year. Whereas, we look at, Ferrari and Mercedes. I'm looking at them too because they've got their concepts wrong. And it's just, we're doing what we can, but realistically, we can't do anything until next year now. And that, to me, it's just quite a sour thought to me because it just doesn't give us an opportunity then to see any form of racing. It's like, basically, if the cars go out at the start of the year and they're bad, then 50%, or call it 75% of the time, you can't see that team do anything until next year now. So, ta-ra, waste of your season. And I don't like that. And I say 75% of the time because, of course, McLaren were in a situation where they were able to get, their way right up from basically the back to the front. And it depends on the concepts, I suppose. So maybe it is a 50-50 point. I get that. But I don't know. There's just something about the new budget, the budget caps and this new regulations. I'm really not clicking with it. And maybe if we get a super close title fight that goes, to the final few races, obviously that will probably end up changing my mind. Obviously, I was bored in some eras of the regulations when Mercedes were winning it. And of course, why would I be bored when I'm a Mercedes fan? Well, obviously, yes, I was seeing a Hamilton-Rosberg fight back in when they were doing it. But if Hamilton was on pole, then Hamilton was probably going to win. If Rosberg led by the end of lap one, he was probably going to win. Obviously, 17 and 18, new regulations, two really contested title fights. Take that 100%. And then obviously it got a little bit weak then. Mercedes dominated in 1920. And then you're thinking, well, Bottas is not really going to do anything, so this is a bit boring. It's just Hamilton on pole and winning. I want to see Mercedes winning, but with a challenge. And then that's when I loved 2021 until the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix ended. And that's where I end that season. So, yeah, there's rock in a hard place. But I'm not convinced by these new regulations just yet. And hopefully some things can change on that. Speaking of not being convinced, I'm also not convinced on the sprints either. And the reason I'm coming back to the sprints is because I did actually put out a post on my YouTube here, right? And I'm loading it up right here, right on the phone side of things, you get me? Because I wanted to basically put out a poll and see what you guys were saying in terms of, well, sprints in general. Did you like them or do you not? Now I put this out. I said, do you like the sprint format? Let me know what you think and I'll showcase your thoughts in the next F1 debate video. Now, out of only, I know it's only, I've only had, I have quite a small F1 community now because I don't really focus on just Formula 1 anymore. But I ended up with 50 votes in total and 20% said yes, you like sprint formats, and 80% of you said no, that you don't. And I just get the feeling that F1 just don't seem to be listening to the fans at all anymore. And I did actually have a comment from that post. And you're going to make me try and pronounce your name. And I really am bad at pronouncing names. So bear with it here. And yeah, we're going to go with Kasara501. That's definitely wrong, but you know who you are. Shout out for putting your posts in here and shout out for watching the videos. And good on you, you sexy bugger. You basically put this out. So, I don't really like the sprints. While it can be exciting if the conditions vary from Saturday to Sunday, as it did in Austria and Belgium when we had the wet race in the sprint, it usually just spoils a lot of things. Race pace, tyre wear, etc. If you're fast during a Friday qualifying, you're probably fast Saturday too. The same goes for the race sessions. By the time the sprint was over in Baku, we knew Leclerc wouldn't be able to stay in front in the race. They can't change their setups. Apart from retirements and other unwanted events, you get the same thing twice. Part of what I like with the current format, being the 3 practice sessions qualifying in a race, is that everything builds up towards the race itself. Here we are given 2 qualifying sessions and 2 races. Everybody has the same setup, the same cars, and the same tyre wear. We should not be going into a Grand Prix with knowledge of how everyone is performing in a race on the circuit this year, but we are. The Grand Prix should be special, but we have 23 of them and 6 extra. And I completely agree with what you've said there. I really do. I think when we go into these sprints, we very much, like I said, like I put it there, you already know what's going to happen. And I think moving forwards, if they're going to keep sprints in there, we should be able to change Parc Fermé at some point after a sprint, in my opinion. For me, if you want to keep your sprints, which by the way I don't, then you have FP1, you have sprint qualifying, and you have the sprint race. Okay, so you've got FP1, you then put the cars into Parc Fermé. You do qualifying and you do the sprint race itself. After the sprint race, you then take the cars out of Parc Fermé. They can then make any setup changes that they wish to do overnight, heading into then the, not overnight, sorry. From Parc Fermé, you take them out of Parc Fermé after the sprint race. After the sprint race then, they can take the cars back and then they'll have qualifying later in the day. you can then make any changes setup-wise that you want to, that you've learned from the sprint race, heading into the qualifying then for the main race, and then you put the cars back into Parc Fermé again. Basically, you open up Parc Fermé, or you just do do practice qualifying in the sprint race with no Parc Fermé rules at all, and then after the sprint race is done, and then as soon as the qualifying for the main race begins, that's when the cars go into a Parc Fermé. You've had all that time there, you've had a race and a quali to learn things and do some work with setup. Now you're in full setup for the main race itself. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with solutions for something I hate, so we'll leave it at that. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and talk about the teams, how they got on throughout the course of this weekend, and then we're pretty much going to wrap it there. Normally I do a prediction of what's going to happen in the next race, but it's Las Vegas, and we've never been there before, so we have no form of way in there. So I'll do a basic prediction, but not like I tried to do. So Red Bull were obviously rapid. They were the fastest. What do you expect? McLaren, very good pace in the hands of Lando Norris. Piastri, super unlucky to be involved in the incident on the first lap. I'm pretty sure, he got hit in the back after the crashes at the first corner. Lost a huge amount of his bodywork and basically just had a fully compromised race. Didn't really get to do anything with it. Aston Martin, credit to them. They've managed to find something after they got lost for the past few races. And that's good for them. Good for their progress heading into 2024. If they can finally understand what was going wrong, it's definitely going to help them moving forward. So they'll definitely take that as a race weekend. Ferrari, yet more unlucky for them. I mean, they didn't have the pace anyway to probably beat Aston, I don't think. Maybe, I'm not really too... Maybe Lance Stroll they could have beaten. But not Fernando Alonso. But yeah, unlucky for Charles Leclerc with a power steering, a hydraulic failure, which affected obviously his power steering, which meant he slid off into the barriers. Another bit of rotten luck for for Charles Leclerc there. What he would have done from second on the grid, I don't think he really would have done much. I think the Ferrari was just not as quick as the Red Bull, or the McLaren, or maybe even the Aston as well. So I couldn't really see them doing that much, if I'm perfectly honest. But, you know, it is what it is for them. For Carlos Sainz, it was a compromised race. He got stuck behind the Mercedes for pretty much the whole of the first stint. Did manage to overtake them then in the second stint, but he didn't really trouble anybody else after that point. Speaking of Mercedes, easily the worst weekend they've had in 2023. And as Toto Wolff pointed out, it's pretty much just solidified that they need to go in a completely different direction, which they're already doing for 2024. Where I think Mercedes got it wrong, I actually don't know. I mean, from what it looks like is that they just got every single element of that car wrong. And it's surprising because, you know, going into qualifying, you know, they were, all right, they had a big straight line speed loss. And that's, you know, they were like 3 tenths slower than like the McLarens in a straight line. So they had that, but in quali, you know, they were like, you know, less than 2 tenths off the pace. So you're kind of thinking in the race, that's normally when they're quicker, but they just weren't. They ruined their tyres horrifically throughout all of that. And yeah, it was just poor from them. Really, really bad. And I guess maybe they probably went a bit conservative, in my opinion, because they got disqualified from the last sprint. I reckon if you gave them a full set of practice sessions, things would have changed. But then it would have changed for everybody. Everyone's got an hour, so everyone's either going to get it right or wrong. But I think just Mercedes just genuinely got everything wrong that they possibly could. But that's the game. Game's a game at the end of the day. That's what they say, game's a game. AlphaTauri I want to come to next. They were brilliant this weekend. And I think Williams need to start looking over their shoulders a bit because AlphaTauri in these last 2 races, I'm not sure what the gap is between them in the championship, but it could get very close between those two. And if it does, I think AlphaTauri might just jump Williams in the championship. Ricciardo was brilliant in the sprint in particular. Yuki Tsunoda was much better than Ricciardo in the main race. But of course, Daniel was super unlucky again with the tyre or the rubber from the tyre that flung and just smacked his rear wing. And that is the definition of just unlucky, in my opinion, on that one. So, yeah, big shame for Daniel Ricciardo. But, you know, AlphaTauri have definitely made some progress. And they'll be happy with that. Alpine actually had a decent weekend. I can't remember if Pierre Gasly beat Lewis Hamilton in the race or not. But they didn't do too badly. You know, they were pretty poor in qualifying. But they certainly got their act together in the race. Shout out to Alpine as well, because the last time I did these team rundowns, and I'll probably continue to do it, I forgot about them. There's always one team that I forget when I'm going through this. So, you know, bear with it for a little bit. Haas, well, we didn't really get to see too much of them because they both crashed in the start of the race. Of course, I think it was Hulkenberg was able to continue, but he would have 100% taken damage from that. But Haas are a team at the moment. They're actually very disappointing, and the reason for that is because they brought they brought a B-spec car, and they've learned nothing from it. You know, they've made all these changes, and they're still severely poor on tyre wear. And yeah, Austin obviously was, 50-50 because it's a sprint weekend, so you don't really know what you're doing. But they did make setup changes in the pit lane, to have a pit lane start, so they would have learnt a bit. Then Mexico, you had an FP1, 2, and 3. So, all right, granted, the high altitude doesn't really allow too much information because obviously you're cooling the car heavily, but you would have taken something from it. And then here in Brazil, again, just didn't learn anything. So, I don't know. Something weird about Haas at the moment. Yeah, not too sure really where they can go with it, to be honest. Alfa Romeo, disaster of a Grand Prix for them. Double DNF, not really much to say. I thought that they could potentially do something in that battle between Williams and AlphaTauri, but I think it's just between them two now. I don't think Alfa Romeo really have anything up their sleeves to offer any more issues with the PU, which is a worry for Ferrari as well, because there is a rumour that Ferrari need to take an engine penalty in these final 2 races. If they do, I would see them probably doing it at Vegas this time around, but then they don't know the track at all, but it is a high-speed circuit, so maybe they might do. But yeah, bad news for Alfa Romeo, and yeah, shame, but a bad race for them. And then we have obviously there's one more team that I have completely forgot. Williams, there we go. And I've probably forgotten somebody else in the mix of all that, but Williams, I mean, Albon couldn't really do much because he crashed on the first lap. It's one of those incidents, the Albon one, where no one's at fault. It's just the way racing can sometimes go. The merest of taps, and you start to all sandwich in a little bit. And yeah, it just happens. Obviously, Sargent had a decent race to P11. Couldn't get into the points, but it was a decent race for them. But yeah, they're definitely under pressure now from AlphaTauri and all of that. But that is pretty much it for this F1 debate video. We've pretty much discussed, again, how I hate sprints, how the regulations just aren't working with me at the moment, and how all the teams got on. In terms of the Vegas Grand Prix, I mean, it could potentially be the coldest Formula 1 race we've ever had. The coldest was, I believe, the 1978 Canadian Grand Prix, which was held in October, which was a mere 5 degrees air temperature. Now, heading into Vegas, obviously, in the daytimes, obviously you're thinking Las Vegas, desert, hot. But obviously, it's hot in the day, but it's super cold in the night. And of course, the race being held at effectively midnight in Vegas, it's going to be around about, between 5 to 7 degrees air temperature. So it's going to be super cold out there. So it's going to be a high-speed circuit. You know, expect Monza-spec rear wings on the cars. Or Belgium, probably more Monza type. There's no long high-speed corners, so you can't heat up the tyres at all. There's a lot of heavy braking zones, so there's going to be cold brakes locking up all the time. It's just going to be carnage. I can't wait for it. It'll be great. But yeah, if you guys ended up enjoying the video though, drop a like, subscribe if you're new around here as well. And I'll catch you guys for the F1 debate after the Vegas Grand Prix. Take care all. Peace.